Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Imagine your life turned upside down by a false accusation and the people closest to you turned away. But what if there's something darker behind it than just a mistake? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy watching. Are you Jim McKay? I was interrupting a routine Friday night argument with my lovely wife, and about whether it was better for a woman to do her own shopping or, in our case, whether the poor, depressed husband after a hard week at work should be deprived of the opportunity to have a cold drink straight from the refrigerator. I turned around with a big smile, thinking it was probably just another Saints fan wanting my autograph. This is for sleeping with my wife, you idiot. My nose exploded in pain under some idiot's fist, and I collapsed like the proverbial sack of potatoes, falling backward as the shock instantly transferred to my legs before I hit the back of my head on something very, very hard. Shaking my head, I struggled to stand up, barely making out the big, dark-haired guy in my blurry vision as he quickly walked away from me. My brain went into panic mode as I blacked out. I think it's worth telling a little about myself. My name is Jim McKay. I am 39 years old, just over 6 feet tall, and built like a brick house. I'm a handsome man with a figure like Brad Pitt and hair like an aged rock star. My hair is indeed quite long, although now streaked with gray, but my face is, well, let's just say battle-worn. I have a really powerful build, so it's not all a lie. My poor nose has now been broken for the 4th time, leaving it irregularly shaped and stretched across most of my face, with many scars above both my eyes. I played the great game of rugby league 384 times for my local team, St. Helens, a small town in the northwest of England, about 14 miles from Liverpool. I played for just over 12 years until I retired in 2004 at the age of 30 due to knee injuries. I also played 32 international matches for England or Great Britain, often against our arch-rivals, Australia, whom I hate with a passion but at the same time respect very much. You could say that at one time I was a bit of a star. However, I had a problem with a short temper. My temperament became known early in my professional rugby career, and rival teams often used this against me, provoking me to react and causing the referee to send me to the penalty box for 10 minutes or, worse, send me off for the rest of the game. Anyone who follows rugby league knows that playing short-handed, even for a short time, creates great difficulties for the rest of the team. The senior players kept trying to tell me what was going on and pointed out how if I didn't get a grip on myself, my career would be over before it really began. Eventually, the club got tired of it and sent me to anger management courses. This helped a lot, but the problem remained, and I had to make a conscious effort to control myself despite provocation. Now I try to count to 10 when I feel angry. This works most of the time, but sometimes I only get to 2 or 3 before I explode. I was making good money for a rugby league player, nowhere near what those pampered footballers made, but enough to save for retirement. After retiring, I became the manager of a local hardware store owned by a big Saints fan and eventually bought his business when he wanted to retire. We have since expanded the business to include a large organic garden center, which has become quite profitable. I also part-time coach the Saints Junior Academy team, along with a few ex-players, and have a great time trying to get the boys up to the level required for the first team. In general, everything is going very well for us. When I say we, I mean me and my second wife, Anne. She is a beautiful blonde, 10 years younger than me, the daughter of a wonderful lady named Mary and a scoundrel named Ralph Harvey. You might think that I don't get along well with my father-in-law, and you'd be absolutely right. I can't stand this loud, drunk idiot. He's one of those ex-pros that all the players hate. He played about a dozen times for the first team back in the 80s, but to listen to him, it sounds like he was one of the greatest of all time. He always shows up at ex-player events at the club, invariably gets so drunk he can barely stand, and rants to every poor soul he can get his hands on about how great his team was and how no other player today could have played in his time. This is what you need when you're trying to have a quiet drink while meeting old friends. And, as I said, is my second wife. I met her when she had just returned from university after finishing her fine art course in 2006. I was at the rugby club's annual children's Christmas party for the local children's home, playing Santa Claus, when her mother brought her over and introduced us. I think I fell in love with her at that very moment. Anna knew almost everything about me. She was, and remains, a big rugby fan, so when she learned that Mary knew me well, she begged her mother to introduce us. We chatted like old friends for about the next half hour. Mary left us a couple of minutes after we met, and I found it much easier to talk to her than any other woman since my very high-conflict divorce the year before. My first marriage ended extremely unpleasantly, to put it mildly. I married Diana in 1996 after we had been dating for just over 2 years. I was just over 21, and she was 24, and we were very much in love. At first, she gradually became jealous of my growing fame and local popularity, hating every time a fan asked for my autograph when we were together, often acting extremely rudely when doing so. We learned early on that Diana was having trouble conceiving a child, which didn't bother me too much at the time, but she was very shaken by it, and it caused a lot of problems in our relationship. I realize now that not being able to conceive must have been a terrible blow to her sense of femininity, but at the time, I was definitely insensitive to her needs. Anyway, our marriage lasted several years, and in 2004, she decided that she wanted something that would belong only to her, separate from me. She had always loved drawing and painting since childhood, so she enrolled in an art course at a local evening college. There, she met that Cockney jerk, as he quickly became known in our family circle. His name was Paul Deff, and he was her teacher. He was older than her, 42 to her 31, and was a typical artistic teacher of adult education. He could not draw himself but felt qualified enough to teach others. He was a tall, skinny jerk, always dressed in someone else's old clothes, and had the stupidest haircut you've ever seen, almost completely bald on top with a ponytail that almost reached his waist in the back. Imagine what a complete idiot he looked like. Over the next few months, he began taking her out for drinks after class, and it appears these quick drinks turned into a full-blown affair. She started dating him while I was away at games, and I imagine they had a lot of intimate. All this became clear during the divorce. He finally convinced her that she was too intellectual and smart to be with me, a Neanderthal, and she would be much better off with him. It all came to a head when she bluntly announced to me at home one Sunday evening that she had fallen in love with someone else, wanted a divorce, and wanted half of everything we had. She moved in with him that night. The next day, she lifted the restraining order preventing me from contacting her or him, citing that I was a very dangerous person as evidenced by my profession, and she was afraid that I would attack her and her new partner. She knew me so well that if I got anywhere near that little, I would rip some of it off and hang it around her damn adulterous neck. However, being a local celebrity has its perks, and I was able to hire the best and most ruthless divorce lawyer in the area. They were able to use their admitted infidelity and my heartbroken innocence to our advantage. My shark lawyer took them to the cleaners, proving to the court that my wife abandoned our marriage to commit adultery with someone who, as a teacher, should be above reproach. The judge agreed with her and awarded me the house and most of our property, while Diana received alimony of £50 per week for 3 years or until she remarried, whichever came first. Mr. Deff may have considered himself superior in every way to a dumb, uneducated lout like me, but that didn't stop this money-hungry couple from living together for 3 years and getting married only a week after her damn alimony ran out. I may well give the impression that I'm bitter about all this, and I'm damn right. The experience with Diana and the jerk made me suspicious and distrustful of almost every woman I dated over the next few months. Sure, I dated a few times, but I could never allow myself to get emotionally involved with any of them. I only had intimate with 3 of them all once, and then I met Anna. We became close friends long before we became lovers, getting to know each other very well, much to the chagrin of her father. Coincidentally, given how Diana met the jerk, Anna introduced me to fine art and other so-called intellectual pursuits after I retired from rugby. We often went to London for weekends, always visiting world-famous art galleries and even going to the opera in Covent Garden a few times. I've always been a big rock fan, so to say that the whole thing was a culture shock for me would be an understatement. Anna took time to explain to me what actually made a painting or sculpture great, rather than just very good. She really loves her art, but unlike Paul, she knows she is not talented enough as an artist herself and now works as an art historian and curator at the Tate Gallery in Liverpool. We were actually friends for 3 years before we became lovers, although I had known for months that I was deeply in love with her. However, I was still very nervous about making the commitment, clearly mentally scarred by my previous disastrous family experiences. Eventually, in 2010, Anna was clearly fed up with my lack of commitment to our relationship. She turned to face me with a stern expression on her beautiful face and said, "James McKay, I've been in love with you since I was 14, and I've been in love with you since I met you. So unless you ask me to marry you right now, I'm going to be on fire for you." What could a person say to that? We got married 6 months later in her favorite church, surrounded by all our friends, family, and lots of ex-rugby players. Very slowly, I began to come to my senses. My head gradually cleared, my eyes tried to focus, and eventually, I was able to see a small crowd gathered around me. With difficulty, I tried to get to my feet, but I felt a firm hand on my chest pushing me back to the ground. "I'm a nurse. Please don't try to get up, sir. You've had a bad blow to the head," she said. Throwing my head back on the paper towels placed under my bleeding skull, I gradually focused on the dark brown features of my assistant. "My name is Rose, and I am the head nurse at St. Luke's Theater. You have a serious injury, and it appears your nose is broken, so please do not move until the ambulance arrives." Her voice had a distinct South African accent, and I could see that she was a big girl, as they say. Her breasts were perhaps the largest I had ever seen from below, stretching her dark blue scrubs to the limit. Although she was a caring professional, there didn't seem to be much sympathy in her voice as she continued, "Obviously, this isn't the first time your nose has been broken, by the looks of it. But a blow to the back of the head can be a big problem, so please just lie there until the paramedics arrive." Now that my eyes were focusing better, I looked around at the rapidly growing crowd of onlookers, slowly noticing their facial expressions. There was no concern, sympathy, or any of the other natural emotions one would normally show towards someone who might be seriously injured. Instead, there was judgment from some and outright amusement from most. Completely ignoring Sister Rose's advice, I tried to stand up, only to feel dizzy again and had to sit down with my back against the concrete pillar that I had apparently hit my head on when I fell. "Please, Mr. McKay, don't move. Your head could have been seriously injured," Rose pleaded. Feeling something was wrong with the good sister, I asked her quietly, "Where's my wife? Where is Anne?" "You mean the blonde?" After getting knocked down by another person, she loaded all her shopping into the car and sped out of here like a bat out of hell. "What? Why?" Rose gave me a stern, disapproving look and, looking around at the other onlookers, replied, "Actually, yes, she said a lot and screamed even more." Completely stunned, I asked, "She was screaming? What? Why didn't she stay to help me?" "She's called you a lot of wrong names, Mr. McKay, most of which I would never use. But she doesn't seem to approve of the idea of you sleeping with someone else's wife. And if I may say so, Mr. McKay, I totally agree with her. Unfaithful husbands deserve to have their noses broken. But I never cheated on her," I muttered, trying to understand what was going on. "Excuse me, what did you say, Mr. McKay?" the kind sister asked, leaning towards me to hear me better. "I said I never cheated on her. I would never do that. She knows I couldn't. Mr. McKay, I saw and heard everything, and I certainly don't think another gentleman would hit you like that without a good reason," objected the reproachful Sister Rose. I became quite annoyed at what seemed to be a complete misunderstanding. "I have no idea who he is, let alone who his wife is, and I'm telling you I've never slept with another man's wife." I almost shouted with indignation. "Mr. McKay, there is absolutely no need to swear like that. Please refrain from using such language," Rose said, clearly reprimanding me. "Sorry, sister. I just can't figure out what just happened here," I replied, being duly reprimanded by my savior. While most of the rapidly growing crowd laughed at my discomfort as the first witnesses informed the new arrivals about what was happening, Rose added, "I don't think I'm the one you need to convince, Mr. McKay, but I don't think you'll be sleeping with your own wife anytime soon either." And that's how I ended up in the emergency department of St. Luke's General Hospital at 11:45 p.m. on a Friday night in June. Sister Rose very kindly told the arriving paramedics what had happened as they loaded me into the ambulance. Of course, one of the paramedics turned out to be a mock Australian. Lance spent the entire trip mocking the big international rugby league player who was knocked out with one blow, telling me it was long overdue for what I had done to Aussie heroes in the past. The idiot even took a photo of my bloody face on his mobile phone to send to his friends back home in Australia. His colleague was no better. She was a sweet young lady who clearly did not approve of cheating husbands, making it obvious that she shared Sister Rose's opinion. She must have gotten her turn to insert the Roman 4 that medics use as part of the procedure and clearly took advantage of it. What happened to all the caring professionals our health service is supposed to have? I'm sure she used a dull needle because it hurt like hell when she administered that stuff. These two friendly medics wheeled me straight to the emergency room on a gurney, leaving me at the mercy of the emergency room staff. Of course, they had to tell everyone who would listen who I was and what had happened to me, so again, I was faced with complete indifference to my well-being from all the nurses there. Eventually, the doctor on duty, a woman, examined the back of my head with the care I expected from a busy, tired professional. She took one look and sent me for an X-ray. Luckily, the orderly in charge of the wheelchair that took me to the X-ray room was a big Saints fan. He took great pleasure in telling me how he was at Wembley when I scored the winning goal against Wigan in the 1998 Cup final. This was not surprising, as almost everyone I've ever spoken to from St. Helens claimed to have been there on that great day. By the way, that day was the greatest of my rugby career. Hearing 35,000 Saints fans sing Martha and the Vandellas' Jimmy Mack as I walked back from scoring a last-minute goal to win the cup against our greatest rivals, it just doesn't get any better than that. Bob, the orderly, kindly asked if there was anyone he could report my location and injuries to, so I gave him Anna's cell number and asked him to call her, promising to do so. He left me at the X-ray station. Unfortunately, Bob was clearly a gossip. He simply had to tell the radiologists on duty what he had heard about me. Apparently, I had been beaten up by a jealous husband for sleeping with his wife. So again, I was conscientiously ignored by everyone until there was no one else left to X-ray. Then I had to wait for Busy Bob to come back and take me back to see the doctor. He eventually came back for me, took me back to the emergency room, and dropped me off in the waiting room again. All the way back, he insisted on talking about rugby, barely letting me get a word in, until his voice echoed in my throbbing head. As he was leaving, he suddenly remembered what I had asked him to do and said, loud enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear, "By the way, Jim, I called your wife as you asked." She said, and I quote, "Let that cheater rot in hell for all I care." Here I am, sitting in the middle of a very busy, crowded emergency room, waiting for the doctor on duty to examine me, hopefully stitch up my wounds, and send me home. By this time, I was fully conscious but still had no idea who hit me or why he thought I was sleeping with his wife. Looking around, I could see amusement, contempt, and outright disdain on the faces of most of the patients and staff who waited with me. I could hear whispers accusing me of being a cheating idiot who clearly couldn't keep his gun in his pants. To be honest, I haven't slept with anyone's wife but my own, I said, addressing no one in particular but loud enough for everyone to hear. I have no idea who this guy is or who his wife is. I swear on my mother's life I don't. Yes, sure, came the answer from some unidentified woman. I did not sleep with anyone else, I shouted. At the sound of my raised voice, the guard on duty, a big guy who was obviously a frustrated cop and needed a uniform to prove his manhood, hurried towards me. Having glanced at my expression, he apparently decided it was better to refrain from action and stopped in place. "Jim, please don't make trouble," he pleaded. "I don't want to call the police." "No problem, just leave me alone," I barked. Anyone who has ever sought help in a busy emergency department on a Friday night will understand how long the wait can be, served by overworked and stressed staff who are unhappy to be on duty and deal with all the drunks and other antisocial elements that show up at this time of the week. So it's no surprise that I had to wait forever to be examined. I was eventually called back to the same doctor who first examined me. She took a close look at the x-rays of my battered skull while I sat there. "There's no sign of a fracture, Mr. McKay, but I'd like you to stay the night so we can observe you and see if there are any problems later. 24 hours should be plenty." "I'm fine now, Doc, just a bit of a headache." "It's no worse than a lot of times on the rugby field," I replied, perhaps a little harshly. "Who's the doctor here, Mr. McKay?" "How would you like it if I started telling you how to play this stupid game?" she shot back. "You'd be in good company, document." "Every week, thousands tell me what I'm doing wrong," I replied, trying to soften the situation. "I'm sure I'll be fine, and I'd really like to go home." "If that's the case, maybe if you insist, sir." "I cannot physically stop you from leaving here, but I must insist that you sign a document stating that you are leaving the hospital against all my recommendations. Obviously, you know much more about the possible consequences of a serious blow to the head than a simple, experienced emergency doctor who studied at the university for 6 years and has been working in this department for the last 5 years. Turning and picking up a medical razor, she continued in her moralizing tone, "You are, of course, a highly skilled amateur who apparently knows much better how thick your skull is and how little harm a gentle collision between a human skull and a concrete pillar can cause." Sensing that her patience might be wearing thin, I decided it would be best to keep my mouth shut while she shaved an unreasonably large patch of hair from the back of my head to stitch me up. "Here are 7 stitches, Mr. McKay. I'm sure you know the procedure. They should dissolve in about a week and will leave you with another good scar to add to your collection. Please see your doctor next week to make sure there's no infection in the wound, and I must emphasize how important this is, despite your excellent knowledge of these matters. If you experience any dizziness or changes in vision, return here immediately." Turning away from me and putting away the needle and equipment, she continued, "I also suggest that you avoid encounters with jealous husbands in the future, Mr. McKay." "Damn it, Doc. I haven't slept with anyone's wife." "It's all a big misunderstanding," I exclaimed. "Why does everyone think I'm some kind of cheating idiot?" "As they say, Mr. McKay, if the hat fits," she replied coolly. "Now, if you insist on leaving, do so. We are extremely busy here, as you can see." By then, it was 1:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, a great time to try to get a taxi home. I tried calling Anna on her mobile and also on her home phone. Since my parents were on vacation, a taxi was my only option. Finally, at about 2:45 a.m., my ride home arrived. The driver looked at my bloody clothes and immediately declared, "I won't take a drunk from the hospital. Please call another taxi, mister." Jumping into the back seat before he could move, I barked at him, "I'm not drunk. Now take me home before I get really angry." "Okay, mister. Just please don't bleed in my car. I work all night, and I don't think my other passengers would like it if their clothes got dirty," he replied. "No problem, buddy," I said. Half an hour later, we arrived at my house. After I got out of the taxi and he drove away, I noticed for the first time that my car was parked in the driveway and Anna's SUV was missing. This meant that she had at least returned home and put away her shopping. As I walked around my locked car, I slowly realized that I was locked out of not only my house but also my car, and I had no keys to get in. Of course, I did what any calm, rational, clear-thinking man with a broken nose and 7 stitches in the back of his head would do under the circumstances. I broke the door. Before I even made it to the bedroom, the powerful painkillers they gave me immediately knocked me out, and I fell asleep on the couch. However, I remember thinking at that moment that someone would pay for all this before I fell asleep. I woke up a little after 10 a.m. on Saturday morning, feeling like absolute crap. My head hurt, my nose seemed the size of a small mountain, and the lump on the back of my head was extremely painful. I dragged myself to the bathroom and completed my morning routine. Surprisingly, I had the usual morning excitement, but getting help while sitting like a woman solved that little problem. Then I took a shower, trying not to get my hair wet as the sympathetic doctor had told me the day before. I didn't shave, then looked in the mirror to comb my hair. Damn, what a view! My nose was covered with a bandage that stretched across both cheeks, and my eyes were as black as a panda. After getting dressed, I threw the bloody t-shirt I'd worn the night before in the trash, threw my jeans in the laundry basket, and made myself a cup of coffee. I thought I knew exactly where Anna might have gone, so the first thing I decided to do was fix the front door. It had been the object of all my frustrations and anger earlier and didn't look its best, hanging on its hinges with a broken lock and door frame. I called Alan, my assistant manager at work and probably my best friend in the world, and asked him to bring a new door frame and lock as soon as possible. I refused to explain when he asked why I needed a new door so urgently and told him to keep it to himself. A couple of hours later, we had the new door installed, and Alan left with strict instructions not to tell anyone anything. He tried a couple of times to find out why I was walking like a bear with a sore, why my face and head were in such a state, and what happened to the door. The first time he asked, I muttered that it was none of his business. When he asked again a little later, he received a rude answer from me and was not so politely informed not to pry. Resisting the temptation to mention that he would probably be better off not prying, he helped me install the new door before returning to work, taking away all the remnants of my unwarranted attack on the door. By this time, it was after 3 p.m., and I really needed to contact Anna and explain that it had all been a misunderstanding. I wanted to convince her to come home to care for her unjustly injured husband. I was right, she had gone to her parents' house. Her SUV was in their driveway when I pulled up, so I parked behind it to prevent her from driving away again. I hurried up the path, rang the doorbell, and waited to see who would answer. A few seconds later, Mary, my beautiful mother-in-law, opened the door just a crack, having first installed a security chain, and looked out through the narrow opening. She shuddered when she saw my condition, and the expression of sympathy on her face quickly changed to one of stern disapproval. "James, how could you?" she asked, still not letting me into the house. "How could you treat Anna this way? I thought you were better than this." Mary always used my full name when I seriously messed up, so I kept a calm and quiet tone as I responded, "Mary, I never cheated on Anna despite what she's going through, and I would never cheat on her. Honestly, please let me in so I can talk to her and explain everything." "No, James. She doesn't want to talk to you right now. She's furious. She thought you were the love of her life, and she's so disappointed in you. I know it looks bad, Mary, but I really don't know who this guy is or who his wife is. Let me explain this to Anna. Please, let me try to convince her to at least listen. James, I definitely want to believe you. I love you like my own son, and it would break my heart if all of this turned out to be true. But..." She closed the door again in my face and walked deeper into the house. I hoped it was to persuade Anna to let me talk to her. A couple of minutes later, the door was chained open again, and there was the face of my irate father-in-law. "I always knew you were a scoundrel, you arrogant jerk. I should never have let my daughter marry you," he blurted out, protected by the door. "Count yourself lucky that I'm not 20 years younger, otherwise, I would give you the rebuff you deserve, you traitor." This was too much. I wasn't going to put up with such disgusting behavior from him. My anger quickly grew until I shouted back, "You're disgusting. Firstly, never in your wildest fantasies could you fight me as you so colorfully expressed it. And secondly, I never cheated. This definitely didn't go as planned." I thought as the door slammed in my face. I saw Mary looking at me from the living room window, so I walked over and beckoned her to open it. She did as I asked, opening the window slightly, just enough so that I could hear her. "Please go away, Jim. Let me work on this. There's no chance she'll want to talk to you while you and her dad are here together." "Okay, Mary. I'll go away for a while. I still don't trust myself around this, but please tell her what I said. I'll call her in a short time and try to talk to her, if that's okay. I'll try to convince her to talk to you, Jim, although I can't promise anything. Her father is insisting that she divorce you and get rid of you for good, but leave it to me. You know how he is, he'll calm down in a couple of days. I didn't expect anything less from him, Mary. Why did such a beautiful lady like you ever marry such a disgusting idiot? You could have chosen anyone better than him." I said this quietly, having calmed my anger a little thanks to my beautiful mother-in-law. "You know how it is, Jim. You went through it with Diana. Sometimes you just can't choose who you fall in love with," she replied softly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Now, please go away and let me try to calm things down. Everyone's here. Call me in a couple of hours, and I'll tell you what's going on." I softly kissed her teary cheek, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Mary. I'll talk to you later." I returned home and lounged around the house for a couple of hours before calling Anna on my cell phone around 8 p.m. "Hi, Jim. Sorry, darling. It's Mary, not Anna. She's gone to spend a couple of days with our Georgian leads and won't be back until Monday. Just let her cool off, okay? I'm sure she'll talk to you when she gets back. George is Anna's younger brother. He plays for Leeds Rugby Club and, luckily, is one of my best friends, so I knew he wouldn't turn her against me like her dad did." "Okay, Mary," I replied calmly, holding back my irritation out of a desire to bring my wife home where she belongs. "When you talk to her, please tell her that this is all a big misunderstanding and that I love her more than anything. I know you love her, Jim. I'm sure she'll understand that you would never cheat on her, despite what Ralph tries to tell her. Our George and his wife will set her right. I'll ask her to call you when she comes back. Okay, thank you, Mary. I'm sorry about all this, but honestly, I have no idea what's going on, I replied. I'll talk to you later when I hopefully figure out what the hell is going on. Okay, honey, goodbye. I decided to go to the supermarket on Sunday afternoon to ask the manager for a copy of the CCTV footage from Friday evening. Fortunately, he had anticipated police inquiries, so the recording was ready. Unfortunately, the footage only showed me getting hit by a big guy in a bomber jacket and jeans. His face was never fully visible, making it impossible to identify him. The store manager, also a big Saints fan, gave me a copy of the footage and tried to apologize for the attack that took place on his premises. I explained that the only person to blame was the one who hit me and that he was absolutely not to blame for anything. I then went home and tried to figure out who might actually be behind the attack. After watching the grainy video footage several times, I finally gave up and went to bed after taking a few more painkillers that my favorite doctor at the emergency room had prescribed. Monday morning started out great. I came to work early and sat in my office, hoping to avoid unnecessary contacts. It didn't work out very well. Tongue-tied Alan had apparently already turned everyone against me because there was a stream of employees and familiar clients who needed to see me for one reason or another. By lunchtime, I heard a quiet knock on the door of my office and invited whoever it was to come in. Little Angie, our green-fingered garden manager, poked her head in and immediately burst into tears when she saw my battered face. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, Jim. I didn't know," she sobbed, running into the room and hugging me. "Hey, Angie, don't worry about me, honey," I replied, patting her on the back, touched by her concern. "I'll be fine. Just hope I find the idiot who did this and deal with him once and for all." "That's the problem, Jim." "I know who it was," she mumbled between sobs. "What? How can you know that? You weren't even there on Friday, and you certainly didn't see the video of what happened." She moved away from me and sat down in the chair on the other side of my desk. "I'm so sorry, Jim," she sobbed again. "You don't understand." Looking at her with bewilderment, I asked, "What don't I understand, Angie?" "Please forgive me, Jim. It's all my fault," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's my husband, Jim. It's my damn husband who attacked you." "What? Your husband? But why the hell would he think I was sleeping with you?" Anger rose within me as I sat there, completely stunned by what was happening. I know I'm just a stupid ex, but I would definitely remember if we ever slept together. By this time, Angie was already on the verge of hysterics, recoiling from my anger and covering her face with her hands. She spread her fingers and peered through them at me before speaking again. "Please, Jim, let me explain. I think you better stop crying and tell me why your husband thought I slept with you," I said, standing up and pouring us both some coffee from the constantly simmering coffee maker on the cabinet in the back of my office. Throwing her a box of tissues that I had on the table, I sat down again and placed the coffee in front of her. "Okay, Angie, now explain," I said sternly. "I hope you have a good explanation because I'm really pissed off. I have a broken nose, stitches in the back of my head, and eyes like a goddamn panda." She sank deeper into her chair as I continued, and on top of all this, my wife left me because she believes that I, quite understandably, cheated on her. I saw my secretary, Maureen, 62 and nosy as hell, eavesdropping at her desk, trying to appear busy with secretarial business. "Maureen!" I shouted through the closed door. "Go have a cup of tea or something." "Yes, Jim," she replied, running off, no doubt to tell the rest of the staff what she had heard. "Okay, Angie, explain to me how I could sleep with you without knowing it." The sweet little 25-year-old girl blew her nose like a real soldier, using a tissue before speaking. "Jim, you don't know my husband, do you? He's so jealous. Always has been." "I'm sorry to hear that, Angie, but what made him think you know? He's beating me up, Jim. He's beating me up so badly." With that, she lifted her shirt and showed me her badly bruised ribs, a mix of red, blue, black, and the yellow of old healing bruises. I remembered how we all noticed that Angie had started wearing heavier makeup a few months ago and thought it was just a fashion thing. Damn it, Angie, why didn't you tell anyone? I told her quietly. I hate men who beat women. I had enough reasons to slap Diana several years ago, but it never occurred to me to stoop to such a level. You don't know, Jim. Not many people do. I grew up in an orphanage after being abandoned as a baby. I have no family, Jim, no one to turn to. I was ashamed to tell my friends what was happening. I thought I was nobody, and he wouldn't believe it. He's so sweet when other people are around, and he's such a big man, you know. I'm so scared of him. How long has this been going on, Angie? I asked quietly, feeling the urge to hug this poor girl. When did he start hitting you like that? She wiped her eyes and replied, ever since he first lost his job about 2 years ago. He started drinking heavily and hanging out with a bunch of drunks. Although it was never true, he started imagining that I was cheating on him at work. I tried to assure him that I really loved him and would never cheat, but these so-called friends of his mocked him, saying that I had lost respect for him because he lost his job and that I would look for someone else, like all damn women do when their man can no longer satisfy them. She began to cry again, sobbing like a baby and covering her face with her hands. It's stupid, but now I don't really love him anymore. This has all become too complicated, and the love I once had for him has been beaten out of me. I walked around my desk and pulled her to her feet, hugging her and trying to comfort her. Why didn't you just leave him, girl? Why are you staying with him if you don't love him anymore? You don't have kids, so there wouldn't be a problem. Like I said, Jim, she sobbed into my chest, I'm an orphan and I have no family at all. All our money is invested in the house, and I literally have nowhere to go. Why didn't you go to the police? I'm sure you could have gotten a restraining order against him. Hell, Diana got one against me years ago and I never even touched her. I'm so scared of him, Jim. He threatened to kill me if I went to the police. He says they can't watch him all the time and that sooner or later he'll get to me and finish me off once and for all. The poor girl was already sobbing heartily, clinging to me like a frightened child. This will stop right now, Angie. You leave this idiot to me, I said as I let her sit back down and then walked back to my side of the table. I sat quietly, trying to control my inner rage and wondering what I could do to help her. Slowly, from the depths of my razor-sharp mind, I realized something. I get it, Angie, but why on earth would he think that you and you know? I may be an insensitive jerk at times, but even I would definitely remember having intimate with a girl as cute as you. Breaking into tears again, she covered her face with her hands and replied, last Friday afternoon, after I returned home from work, he was waiting for me, drunk again. He was in a bad mood and immediately attacked me when I walked in the door, demanding to know who it was and threatening to kill me if I didn't tell him. I tried to tell him that there was no one else but him, but he didn't believe me. He started beating me. My face was now dark as thunder. As she continued, I honestly thought that was it, Jim, and he was finally going to kill me. I lay there in terrible pain when he grabbed me by the throat. I just said the first name that came into my head, and it was yours. I'm so sorry, Jim. Now I began to understand all this. This no-good prick must have followed and me to the supermarket on Friday night. Well, he's damn sure he'll pay not only for breaking my nose and making my wife believe I was forcing myself on her, but also for what that wife-beating idiot did to the distraught little lady sitting in front of me. Looking at my watch, I saw that it was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I knew that and should already be with her parents, so I began to make a plan. Angie, I want you to stay with us for a while. Give me a chance to sort this out for you, I said. She perked up noticeably when I said this, relief quickly spreading across her tear-stained features. Oh my God, Jim, thank you. Thank you so much. I really don't deserve friends like you, she sobbed quietly. Just one thing, I said. I want you to come with me and explain everything to Anne. She still thinks I cheated on her, and I need to clear that up before I do anything. Oh Jesus, Jim, I'm so sorry for causing you so much grief. Of course, I'll talk to her. Let me explain what a loving and caring husband she has. Angie walked around the table and hugged me again, peppering my battered face with kisses. Laughing quietly, I pushed her away from me and said, Angie, covering my face with your lipstick won't help my case. Oh, sorry, Jim, she said. Let me wipe this off. She started rubbing my face with her napkins, still wet from her tears. Damn it, girl, my nose is broken and it hurts. Stop. I'll go to the bathroom and wash myself, and you pack your things. We'll go straight to Anne's and stop the damn thing. I shouted at her, pushing her towards the office door. We stopped at Angie's house before heading off to meet Anne. She told me her husband would be at the pub all day, so it seemed like a good time to pick up some of her things if she was going to be staying with us for a while. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived at Mary and Ralph's house. I saw Anne's car in the driveway, so I knew she had to be home. After telling Angie to wait in the car while I went to get my wife, I quickly walked to the front door of their house and knocked. Mary opened it almost immediately, having apparently seen me walking down the driveway. This time, the security chain was not in place. Anne's back yet, Mary? I asked politely. Yes, love, she is here. Unfortunately, Ralph is also home. I have no problem with that. Can I come in, please? I said quietly to my mother-in-law. Of course, come in, she replied, but with concern. Please don't start to fight with him again. I don't want to come between you two. Mary's face showed concern as she led me into the house. I walked behind her at that moment, feeling in the same position as her, and hugged her, giving her a light kiss on the cheek. I think everything will be fine in a minute or two. Don't worry, lovely lady, I whispered as we entered the main living room. Anne was sitting facing the door from which we had entered. Her father stood at the window, looking angrily at me but trying very hard to keep his daughter between us. What do you want now? He snapped at me. I thought I told you that you were no longer welcome in my house. I don't want any trouble, Ralph. I just want to talk to my wife, I said quietly but firmly, emphasizing my. She doesn't want to talk to you now. Leave before I throw you out, he responded, moving even further behind his daughter. Oh my gosh, Dad! And screamed at her father. How many times do I have to ask you to keep your damn nose out of my marriage? I thought Ralph's face was going to explode as he turned beet red, his anger obvious to everyone. Luckily, with a loud snort, he turned and started looking out the window at my car parked on the street in front of his house. Okay, Jim, I'm listening, said Anne. Let's hear what you have to say. Honey, I tried to tell you that it was a misunderstanding, and now I have proof. Please come out to my car and let's discuss this in private, I told her softly, trying not to anger her further. Her father tried to intervene again, pulling her towards him and shouting at me. Just get out of here. And doesn't want to talk. What's that bird in your car? He added. She has nothing to do with you, I responded calmly, ignoring the provocation and remembering my anger management techniques that I had been taught many years ago. And jumped up from her seat and hurried to her father, looking out the window and then at me. Angrily, she asked, Is that her? Is that the girl you had behind my back? She's not like that at all. Now please come outside and talk to us, I said, still maintaining my outward calm. Let me explain to you what is happening. Her father tried to intervene again, pulling her towards him and shouting at me. Just get away from us. And doesn't want to talk to you or your damn. I couldn't count to 10. I quickly closed the distance between me and my wife, her father recoiling from my advance. And you're doing a damn good job of walking outside with me right now, I said forcefully, grabbing her hand tightly. Taking her in my arms like a little doll, I began to leave the room. Mary stood and watched all this, a mixture of sadness and fear on her face. Don't worry, Mary. You know that I will never harm your daughter, no matter what happens, I said, smiling as I walked past my concerned mother-in-law, heading towards the front door. Before leaving the house, I quickly headed to my car. And was beating my chest with her small fists, her legs kicking madly as I carried her to the passenger seat. Gently, I placed her feet on the ground, kissed her forehead, and firmly made her sit in the front seat. Angie was now sitting directly behind my wife. As I closed the door on my wife, I said quietly and as gently as I could, just listen to her and let her explain. I'm sure you'll understand in a minute or two. I then leaned against the closed door, completely preventing him from escaping. After a few minutes of my wife's muffled screams, everything went quiet. I saw Angie crying again as she began to tell my wife her story. I stood there for about 20 minutes or so, grinning back at my idiot father-in-law, who was glaring and gesturing at me from the safety of his home, when a police car came around the corner. Their sirens were in full swing, making them quite difficult to ignore. The car screeched to a stop in front of mine. PC Fruit jumped out of the driver's seat and ran around the front of the car, pulling out and extending his baton as he did so. "Hold on, dude," he shouted, crouching in a position that was obviously meant to be intimidating. "Now lie face down on the floor and stretch out your arms and legs." I was about to tell him exactly where to put my baton and explain that I would never willingly expose myself to such an obvious jerk when his partner approached from the other side of the car. "Hey, Kevin, don't you know anything? You're talking to Jimmy Mack. If you don't want to spend the next few days spitting tea out of your dum, I suggest you put your stick away, and we'll politely ask him what's going on, okay?" Intentionally putting himself between me and the kid with acne, PC Sensible walked up to me and asked, "What's going on, Jim?" "We just received a report of an attempted kidnapping of some guy's daughter at this address." "You don't know anything about this, do you?" I immediately looked over at my in-laws' house and saw idiot Ralph smirking at me as he watched the drama unfold. Taking a deep breath and counting to 10, I explained to Tommy as quickly and thoroughly as I could. He listened attentively without even taking notes, leaning against the car with me. His partner left us on Tommy's instructions over the radio so that their screens would be sorted out without any problems. Tommy apparently believed my version of events, and after he apologized for PC Fruit's overenthusiasm, he went into the house. I could see him giving Ralph and Mary a lecture about wasting the police's time and resources. Then the stern-faced constable returned, winked at me, and stood with his back to the house. We then had a pleasant chat about how he had been a Saints fan for many years before he asked me to autograph his notebook, telling me how happy his son would be when he heard he had met me. He and his young girlfriend then left much more quietly than when they arrived. A couple of minutes later, Angie got out of my car and asked if she could let in out too. The two women immediately hugged and burst into tears, swearing eternal friendship to each other before and turned to me and began showering me with kisses and hugging me tightly. "Oh my God, Jim," she exclaimed excitedly. "We have to help Angie. Her idiot husband was beating her for no reason. Can we help her, Jim? Please?" "Dear, no one needs her more than we do," I said, smiling at the irony of the situation. "I already told her she can stay with us for a while until we sort things out. Will you take her home? I just want to settle a few things before I follow you. It won't take long." "Oh, Jim, I'm so sorry. I never really believed that you would cheat on me. Honey, it's just, my hormones are going crazy right now. I'm so sorry," my loving wife sobbed, hugging my neck tightly and kissing my beaten face. "I understand, my sweet girl. Don't worry. Everything will be fine, dear," I said, laughing and stroking her huge belly. "The sooner we get these babies out, the better. Oh, did I forget to mention that we're expecting twins? Hormonal women, what can you do?" After I saw the two ladies safely in Ann's car and explained the situation to Mary's mother-in-law, I set out on a mission of revenge. A little later, I drove up to Angie's house with the full intention of talking to her husband, Frank. I walked up to their front door and knocked confidently, only to find out that he had not yet returned from his drinking sessions. Contemplating whether to wait for him or not, I was leaning against the wall when a little old lady poked her head over the dividing fence and asked me if I was looking for that drunk idiot who lived here. Smiling at her accurate but cruel description of my goal, I replied that yes, I was looking for an opportunity to talk to her neighbor. "Alice," she introduced herself after recognizing me, "he's a complete idiot. He treats poor Angie terribly. It's long overdue for someone to deal with him." I laughed with her and assured her that he would get what he deserved. I asked if she knew where he might be. "Oh, don't worry about finding him, honey. He just got out of a taxi," she answered, pointing to the end of the driveway. "Okay, Alice, maybe you should call the police in a few minutes if you'd be so kind," I informed her as I stood up to face the approach of someone who was looking at me suspiciously as they walked up the garden path. "I hope you get your revenge on that idiot, Jim. Give him some from me too, if you can," my new friend laughed as she left for her house. I turned to look at Angie's husband as he stopped a few feet away from me. My God, he was a big idiot, at least 6 feet 4 inches, probably 18 or 19 stone in weight. Luckily, he looked out of shape and, of course, was drunk. "What the hell do you want, idiot?" he hissed at me, his face distorted with anger. "Haven't you had enough? Last time, a big star. Yeah, 1 hit was enough to knock you out. They say you must be some kind of tough guy." What a laugh. He walked up to me confidently, saying, "That's what you get for having an affair with someone else's wife. Do you want more now that you're here?" I calmly answered him, activating my anger control therapy. "You are an idiot," he shouted at me. "Who the hell are you?" "She's my damn wife, and I'll treat her any way I want." "Oh, I don't think so, Frank. You can't use a little girl as a punching bag just because you're not the man to treat her properly," I said quietly, making sure only he and I heard it. "And besides, idiot, I had my back to you last Friday, so let's see what you can do when I'm ready for you." I had learned long ago in my career how easy it is to provoke someone with an uncontrollable temperament. Hell, it had happened to me dozens of times, so I had no problem getting this drunken bully to react exactly the way I wanted. "Come on, big guy, let's see how you handle a real man, not a little woman." "Your Angie likes real men, Frank," I taunted. "You damn idiot," he shouted, suddenly rushing at me. "I'll show you who the real man is." He charged at me like a mad bull, swinging a huge circular punch with his right hand. Easily dodging the intended blow, I hit him as hard as possible deep under the ribs. Gasping, he tried again, this time a direct blow with his left hand to the bridge of his nose, which stopped him in his tracks. Then I threw a perfect right hook to the side of his face, and that was enough. He fell face down on the lawn. "I thought you said you were a tough guy," I snorted, laughing at him as I relaxed. "Well done, Jimmy Mac." Alice returned to the fence, this time with her iPhone in her face. "I caught it all on camera," she said. "I saw him attack you first, and you had to defend yourself." "Thanks, Alice," I said. "I think this will come in handy when the police come." I started walking down the path to my car, rubbing my knuckles. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Careful, Jim." When you play team contact sports, you usually learn a lot about spatial awareness. You always know exactly what is happening around you. This has always been one of my greatest strengths. In my rugby career, I could always sense when I was about to be attacked from behind and make the appropriate maneuvers to avoid it. So, I felt rather than heard the big, bleeding goon running after me from behind. Instead of trying to turn around and face him, I quickly leaned forward at the waist. As he tried to hit me from behind, he rolled over my back, unable to stop due to his momentum. The garden shovel he had raised to attack me flew out of his hands as he tried to prevent himself from falling face first onto the concrete path. There he was in front of me on his hands and knees, gasping for breath and trying to get up. His big fat was sticking up like some huge beast waiting to be mounted. I mean, how could I resist? It was too tempting a target. I was never a hitter in my playing days, but that doesn't mean I couldn't kick a ball a long distance. I took careful aim and kicked him as hard as I could right between his raised thighs. Thinking to myself that this punch probably couldn't be considered self-defense, I turned to Alice and said, "It might be better if we didn't have video of this." "Don't worry, honey," she laughed and winked at me. "I'm not very good at using the damn thing anyway. My daughter insisted I buy it in case of an emergency." The damn camera must have turned off right after that. Leaving Alice to taunt the weeping wreck on the ground, I slowly walked downstairs towards the 2 policemen approaching me from the end of the driveway. "Hello again, Jim. Are you in trouble?" Tommy asked. "Guess what?" I replied. Tommy and his partner answered Alice's call. "I see you had a conversation with Big Frank." "No problem, Tommy. I just came to tell him that his wife left him and is going to the police about the constant beatings. He seems to want to kill the messenger. Young Alice up there got it all on video, and I'm sure there will be enough witnesses here to corroborate my story," I said, pointing at the interested onlookers. "Okay, buddy, looks like he's going to need the hospital, so we'll call an ambulance for him. If you don't mind giving us a statement about what happened," Officer Tommy said. His young colleague was instructed to call for an ambulance, and Tommy and I sat in the back of his police car while I recounted the events from the beginning. Tommy said I would need to go to the station to give a formal statement and that it might be worth considering charging Frank with assault, given the video evidence and the testimony of the witnesses. He had a good chance of ending up behind bars for a long time. I drove home to our house to find two very attentive women waiting for me. Angie was just grateful to have a safe place to stay, while my little fat hormonal wife, and went out of her way to show how sorry she was for ever doubting me. I explained to both of them that Frank Grimley was now in custody, that he was in the hospital under police guard, and that I no longer had anything to worry about. After a nice fish and chips dinner, Angie retired to our guest room for the night, hoping for her first good night's sleep in a long time. My wife and I chatted on the sofa, snuggled up together as always. "I'm truly sorry, my dear," she said softly. "I should never have doubted you." "I know, love. It's all over. Just forget about it and don't be nervous," I playfully reproached. "Yes, I know. But if there's anything I can do to make it up to you," she whispered, kissing my lips softly and trying to avoid contact with my still sore nose. "Let me think," I grinned lustfully. "I'm sure we can come to an agreement." "Oh yeah," she laughed. "And what do you mean?" "Frank Grimley was eventually charged with spousal abuse and causing bodily harm to me. He was actually in the hospital for over a week. The judge publicly thanked me in court for coming to the aid of the mistreated wife and said he intended to set an example for all abusive husbands." Frank was completely calm during the trial and gave his testimony in a voice at least 2 octaves higher than his original. He begged Angie for forgiveness, blaming his problems on the loss of his job and subsequent drinking, but the judge was not swayed. He sentenced Grimley to 10 to 15 years in prison with no chance of parole for at least 10 years. Angie divorced Grimley fairly quickly after the trial, and since their house was rented, she had no problem leaving the bad marriage. She stayed with us for several weeks before finding a nice apartment near our place of work and became a much happier and more sociable person. Unfortunately for her, she somehow fell in love with my best friend Alan. He had been admiring her from afar for several years, and now that she was free, he made his move. I'm very happy for them. Now, a few years later, they're living together in a beautiful semi-detached house just outside the city and are 3 months pregnant with their first child. Anna and I now have 2 wonderful children, James J. and the apple of my eye, Mary Elizabeth McKay. They are now almost 4 years old, and Anna is again 3 months pregnant. This story reminds us how easily lives can be ruined because of hasty conclusions and unfounded accusations. Jim showed strength of character despite his ordeal by protecting an innocent man and restoring justice. His resilience and kindness allowed him to keep his family together and help others. Let this story be a lesson to us all. Be careful, don't jump to conclusions, and always strive for the truth. Thank you for being with us. I wish you wisdom and peace in your soul. Put likes and write in comments your opinion about this video and story. Until new videos.